I found out my husband of 10 years isn't a regional sales manager. He doesn't travel to Chicago or Denver or Houston. He travels 30 minutes down the interstate. I thought I was a happily married woman waiting for her hard-working husband to come home. Turns out I'm just the wife who pays the bills, while he plays dad to a 9-year-old boy I didn't know existed. And the only reason I found out is because Facebook suggested a photo I was never meant to see. Here is how my life imploded in a single Monday evening. To understand how stupid I feel right now, you have to understand Mark's routine. For a decade, literally our entire marriage, Mark has been a road warrior. He works in high-end medical device sales. The territory is massive. His schedule is etched in stone. He leaves our house at 5 a.m. on Monday morning to catch the first flight out, and he drags himself through the front door at 7 p.m. on Friday, exhausted, holding a bag of airport duty-free chocolates or a souvenir magnet. He was the perfect provider. On weekends, he was tired, sure, but he was mine. He mowed the lawn, he grilled steaks, he rubbed my feet while we watched movies. I never nagged him about the little things because I knew how hard he worked during the week. I felt guilty that he was sleeping in lonely Marriott hotels while I was comfortable in our king-size bed. God, I was such an idiot. It started last Monday. Mark had left that morning for a week-long conference in Chicago. I kissed him goodbye, handed him his travel mug, and watched him back out of the driveway. Around 7 p.m. that night, I was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, mindlessly doom-scrolling Facebook. I don't have many friends in the neighboring town. Let's call it Oakville. It's a generic suburb about 30 minutes west of us. But you know how the algorithm is. It shows you suggested posts based on location or mutual connections. A post popped up from a public page called Oakville Youth Sports Photography. The caption read, "Highlights from the Regional Little League Championship. What a game." I almost scrolled past it. I don't like baseball. I don't have kids. But my thumb hovered over the screen because the thumbnail was a high-resolution shot of a batter mid-swing, and the clarity was incredible. I clicked the photo to admire the focus. Then my eyes drifted to the background. The depth of field was shallow, so the crowd in the bleachers was blurry. But there, in the third row, sat a man. He was wearing a violently orange vintage windbreaker. My heart skipped a beat. I bought that windbreaker. I found it at a thrift store 3 years ago. Mark laughed when I gave it to him, called it hideous, but said he'd wear it to keep warm. I zoomed in. The blurriness made it hard to be 100% sure, but the posture, the hairline, the way he held his hot dog with his pinky finger slightly extended. It was Mark. But that was impossible. Mark was in Chicago. He had texted me at noon complaining about the wind off Lake Michigan. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered, and then I saw the detail that made the room spin. Sitting on Mark's lap was a boy. The kid looked to be about 8 or 9, wearing a team jersey. Mark had his arms wrapped around the boy's chest, chin resting on the kid's head, cheering. It wasn't the body language of an uncle or a friend. It was the possessive, comfortable body language of a father. I closed the app. I opened it again. I zoomed in until the pixels distorted. Chicago, I told myself. He is in Chicago. This is a doppelganger. You're being crazy. I picked up my phone and called him. It went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual. He often had client dinners on Monday nights. I checked Find My iPhone. Location not available. He always turned it off when he traveled to save battery. I never questioned it before. Now, the silence of the phone felt heavy. I looked at the timestamp on the photo, posted 2 hours ago. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and typed Oakville Little League Fields into my GPS. The drive was the longest 30 minutes of my life. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep the car in the lane. Every logical part of my brain was screaming that I was about to embarrass myself. I was going to drive to a stranger's town, stalk a stranger, and realize it was just a guy who looked like Mark. But my gut was screaming that I was driving toward a funeral, the funeral of my marriage. I pulled into the parking lot of the sports complex. It was mostly empty now. The game had ended hours ago. The sun was setting. I felt foolish. Of course he wasn't here. Even if it was him, they would have gone home. Home. If he was living a double life, he wouldn't just be at the game. He'd be at a house. I drove out of the park and started cruising the nearby residential streets. It was needle in a haystack insanity. Oakville isn't huge, but it's not small. I drove for 20 minutes, passing row after row of cookie-cutter houses. I was about to give up and turn around, to go home and wait for his call, when I saw it. Parked in the driveway of a beige 2-story house with a tidy lawn, it was a silver Toyota Camry. Mark drives a black Ford Explorer for work, but we have a second car, an old silver Camry, that he keeps at the airport park and ride because he doesn't want to pay for long-term parking for the nice SUV. He claims it sits in a lot at the airport all week. I slammed on my brakes. I looked at the license plate. H89LZ4. My car. That was my name on the registration in the glove box. He wasn't in Chicago. He was 18 miles from our front door. I killed the engine and coasted to the curb 3 houses down. It was dark now. The lights inside the beige house were glowing warm and inviting. I got out of the car. My legs felt like jelly. I walked through the neighbor's yard, sticking to the shadows, feeling like a criminal in a low-budget movie. I crept up to the side of the house where the dining room window was. The blinds were open. I looked inside. There was a table set for 3. There was a woman, blonde, petite, smiling, serving spaghetti. There was the boy from the baseball game, still in his jersey, laughing and talking with his mouth full. And at the head of the table sat Mark. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing the orange windbreaker and a t-shirt. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He said something that made the woman laugh, and then he reached out and squeezed her hand. He leaned over and kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a kiss you give your wife of 10 years. I stood in the mulch of the flower bed, watching my husband play house with another family, while his work phone sat somewhere turned off, and his wife sat in the dark 30 minutes away. I raised my phone and snapped 3 photos through the window. The flash was off, but the movement caught the woman's eye. She looked toward the window. I ducked, scrambled back to my car, and peeled away before they could see who was watching. I drove to a gas station parking lot 3 miles away and threw up out the driver's side door. I have the photos. I know where he is. He thinks he's coming home to me on Friday with a box of chocolates and a story about the Chicago wind. He has no idea what's waiting for him. But before I confront him, I need to know everything. I'm going to spend the next 4 days digging until I hit the bottom of this hell. I didn't sleep Monday night. After seeing my husband through that window in Oakville, kissing another woman and playing dad to a secret child, I sat in my car in a gas station parking lot for 2 hours. I wanted to drive back and smash his windshield. I wanted to burn that beige house to the ground. But then a cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. If he has a second family, who is paying for it? I drove home. I walked into the house Mark and I bought 6 years ago. It felt like a stage set. I realized I didn't know the man I shared a bed with, and if I was going to destroy him, I needed ammunition. I didn't just need a divorce lawyer, I needed a forensic accountant. Here is what I found when I started digging. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to my own job. Mark texted me at 8 a.m. "Morning, babe. Heading into a big meeting with the regional directors. Love you." I stared at the text. He wasn't in a meeting. He was probably driving that kid to school in Oakville. I decided to start with the job. Mark has worked for a major medical supply company for 10 years, or so I thought. He always handled the finances because he knew the system better. He deposited his checks, paid the mortgage, and gave me an allowance for groceries, while my salary went into savings. I called his company's main headquarters number, not his work cell. I navigated the automated menu until I got to human resources. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm calling for an employment verification for Mark, last name. We're applying for a mortgage refinancing." "Ma'am, we have no active employee by that name." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. He's a regional sales manager. He's been there 10 years. "One moment." More clicking. Then a voice that was much more guarded. "I have a record for a Mark last name, but he is listed as terminated." "Terminated when?" I asked. 4 years ago, she said. He was let go for cause. Violations of expense reporting policies. 4 years. For 4 years, My husband has been leaving the house on Monday morning and coming home Friday night, pretending to work a high six-figure job he didn't have. I hung up the phone and ran to his home office. He kept a large metal filing cabinet in the corner, locked. He always told me it contained HIPAA-sensitive patient files and that I could go to jail if I looked in there. I went to the garage, grabbed a crowbar, and pried the drawer open. The metal screeched, popping the lock. There were no patient files. Instead, I found the wreckage of our life. There were stacks of credit cards. Not just his, mine. Cards in my name that I never applied for. Discover, Visa, Amex, all maxed out. I found bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed. He hadn't been working a high-paying job. He had been draining our life savings. The retirement fund? Gone. The emergency fund? Empty. Then I found the document that made my knees buckle. It was a deed of trust, a second mortgage on our house. It was taken out 2 years ago for $150,000. On the bottom line was his signature, and next to it was my signature. Except I never signed it. It was a sloppy forgery. I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper, hyperventilating. It all made sense. He was fired 4 years ago. To maintain his lifestyle and to fund the house in Oakville, he started cannibalizing our assets. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, but in this case, I was Peter, and the woman in Oakville was Paul. He was likely working some low-level job locally during the week, or maybe just living off the credit cards, pretending to be the big provider for Family B, while I unwittingly footed the bill. I spent Wednesday and Thursday documenting everything. I took photos of the statements, I called the bank and froze my credit. I spoke to a lawyer who told me to act normal until he was in jurisdiction so we could serve him. Act normal. Right. Friday came. The re-entry. At 7 p.m., just like clockwork, the front door opened. "Honey, I'm home." His voice made my skin crawl. I was sitting at the kitchen table. I had cleaned up the office, pushed the broken lock back into place, and hidden the evidence. Mark walked in, dragging his suitcase. He looked exhausted. He made a show of rubbing his temples. God, O'Hare was a nightmare, he sighed, dropping his bag. Flight was delayed 2 hours on the tarmac. I am wiped out. He walked over to kiss me. I turned my head so his lips hit my cheek. He smelled like fast food and cheap cologne. "I brought you something," he said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a box of chocolates, fancy truffles. "Got them at the duty-free shop in Chicago. Your favorite." I looked at the box. Sarah Sweets. I knew that brand. It wasn't from Chicago. It was a local chocolatier in the mall, in Oakville. He hadn't even tried to cover his tracks. He just assumed I was too stupid to notice. He loosened his tie and sat down across from me. "So," he said, smiling that charming salesman smile, "did you miss me? How was your week?" I looked him dead in the eyes. My hands were folded on the table. Under my palm was the photo I printed out, the one of him in the orange windbreaker, holding the boy. "My week was interesting," I said, my voice dead calm. "I learned a lot." "Oh yeah?" He stood up to get a water. "Like what?" "Mark?" He turned around. "Yeah? How was the flight, really?" "I told you," he said, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "It was long, bumpy. Why are you acting so weird?" "Because," I said, sliding the photo across the table, "I didn't think flights from Chicago landed at the Oakville Little League fields." Mark froze. He looked down at the photo. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "So tell me, Mark," I whispered, leaning forward. "How was the game?" I slid the photo of Mark at the baseball game across the kitchen table. I watched the blood drain from his face. For 10 years, this man has lied to me with a smile. Now, faced with undeniable proof, I expected him to break down, to confess. Instead, he did something that made me realize I was dealing with a sociopath. He laughed. Here is the confrontation that destroyed 2 households in one night. Mark looked at the photo of himself holding the child, then looked back at me and let out a nervous, incredulous chuckle. "Babe," he said, shaking his head. "You're serious? This is what you're upset about? That's not me." I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "That's not me," he insisted, his voice rising in fake indignation. Honestly, I don't know who that is. It looks like me, sure, but look at the jacket. I don't own a jacket like that."
"I bought you that jacket," I said, my voice trembling with rage, "at the Goodwill on 4th Street 3 years ago. I remember because you said it made you look like a traffic cone." "You're crazy," he snapped, grabbing the photo and crumpling it. "I was in Chicago. Check my flight logs. Call my boss." "I did call your boss, Mark." The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the quiet. "I called HR on Tuesday," I continued, standing up. "They told me you haven't worked there in 4 years. They told me you were fired for fraud." The gaslighting vanished. His shoulders slumped. The confident salesman mask cracked, revealing a terrified, cornered rat. He sank into the chair, putting his head in his hands. "I can explain," he whispered. "Explain what?" I screamed. "Explain the second mortgage you forged my signature on? Explain the maxed out credit cards? Explain the child, Mark. Who is the child?" "His name is Leo," he mumbled into his hands. "He's 9. 9? I felt like I'd been punched. "We've been married for 10 years. "I met Sarah 12 years ago," he confessed, tears streaming down his face now. "Before I met you. We were on and off. Then I met you, and I couldn't choose. I loved you both. And then she got pregnant with Leo right after our wedding. I didn't know how to tell you. It just spiraled." "You didn't choose?" I laughed, a harsh, manic sound. "So you chose to steal my retirement fund to play daddy in the next town over?" "I was going to pay it back," he pleaded. "I have a lead on a new job. I just needed to float us for a while. Please, honey, don't do this. We can fix this." "Get your keys," I said. "What?" "Get your keys." I pointed to the door. "We are getting in the car. We are driving to Oakville. And you are going to introduce me to Sarah." "No," he said, standing up, panic in his eyes. "No, we can't do that. You'll kill her. She has a weak heart. I don't care if she has a weak heart." I grabbed his car keys off the counter. "Either we go there now and tell her the truth together, or I call the police right now and report the fraud, the forgery, and the theft. You'll be in handcuffs before midnight. Your choice." He looked at me, looked at the phone in my hand, and realized he had no moves left. The drive to Oakville was silent. Mark drove. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping the door handle. He was crying softly the whole way. I felt nothing. I was cold, hollowed out. We pulled up to the beige house. The lights were on. It looked so normal. A tricycle was on the lawn. "Please," Mark begged as he turned off the car. "Let me go in first. Let me prepare her." "Not a chance," I said. I got out and marched to the front door. Mark scrambled after me, trying to grab my arm, but I rang the doorbell. A moment later, the door opened. It was the woman from the window, Sarah. She was wearing yoga pants and a messy bun. She looked tired but kind. She saw Mark and her face lit up. Then she saw me and confusion washed over her. "Mark?" she asked. "I thought you were in Chicago until tomorrow. Who is this?" Mark stood there, unable to speak. He looked like he was about to vomit. "He wasn't in Chicago," I said, stepping forward, "and he's not a regional sales manager." "Excuse me?" Sarah frowned, stepping back. "Mark, what is going on? Is this one of your work colleagues?" And then it hit me. She didn't know. She wasn't a mistress. She wasn't a co-conspirator. She was just another victim. "Mark told you he travels for work, right?" I asked her. "Black ops? High-level consulting? Something that explains why he has no digital footprint and disappears for 5 days a week?" Sarah's eyes went wide. "He's a logistics contractor for the government," she said slowly. "He has security clearance." I almost laughed. "He's unemployed, Sarah.
He was fired 4 years ago, and he doesn't live in hotels during the week. He lives with me in the next town over. I pulled out my phone and showed her our wedding photo. I'm his wife, I said. We've been married 10 years. Sarah looked at the photo. She looked at Mark. She looked back at the photo. She didn't scream. She didn't slap him. She just crumpled. She fell to her knees in the doorway, clutching her chest, making a sound I will never forget. A low, animal keen of pure devastation. Mark tried to reach for her. Sarah, please, let me explain. Don't touch her, I yelled. Suddenly, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy? Who is that lady? It was the boy, Leo. He was holding a tablet, looking terrified. Mark turned toward the boy, but Sarah scrambled up, moving faster than I thought possible. She shoved Mark backward, hard. Get out, she screamed. Get away from my son. Get out. Mark snapped. The stress, the lies, the collision of his two worlds, it broke him. He started screaming, claiming he did it for us, that he was the victim, that he loved us both. He tried to push past Sarah to get into the house. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I need police at address, I said calmly, while Mark pounded on the door Sarah had slammed in his face. My husband is having a psychotic break, and I have evidence of major fraud. The sirens were the only sound that cut through Mark's screaming. He was arrested on the front lawn of his second life, wearing the clothes I bought him, screaming the name of a woman who wasn't me. But as the police car pulled away, I looked at Sarah standing in the doorway, holding her son. We locked eyes. There was no hate there, just a shared, horrified realization that our entire lives had been built on a sinkhole. And the worst part? The police investigation was about to reveal that money wasn't the only thing Mark was hiding. I thought watching my husband get arrested on the lawn of his other family's house was the climax of this nightmare. I was wrong. That was just the prologue. Once the handcuffs clicked, the real horror show began. I hired a forensic accountant, and what we found made the infidelity look like a minor infraction. Mark wasn't just a cheater. He was a financial predator. And the people who helped him do it, that betrayal hurt almost as much as the affair itself. Here is the nuclear fallout of my marriage. The week after the arrest was a blur of lawyers, detectives, and panic attacks. Mark was held without bail because he was considered a flight risk. Apparently, having two identities and a history of forgery makes judges nervous. I hired a forensic accountant named David to untangle our finances. I sat in his sterile gray office 3 days later, expecting bad news. I didn't expect a catastrophe. David slid a report across the desk. It's a Ponzi scheme, he said bluntly, but instead of investors, he was using his wives. Here is how Mark's dual life actually worked. When he was fired 4 years ago, he didn't tell anyone. He cashed out his 401k to keep up appearances. When that ran dry, he started stealing from Sarah, the other wife. He convinced her to refinance her home to invest in a startup. He took that $80,000 and used it to pay my mortgage and buy me anniversary gifts to keep me suspecting nothing. When that money ran out, he forged my signature on a second mortgage for my house. He took that cash and used it to pay for Leo's private school tuition and Sarah's car payments. He was bouncing money back and forth between two households, skimming off the top for his own business expenses, which turned out to be online gambling and expensive dinners alone. But then David dropped the bomb. There's something else, David said, flipping a page. Are you aware that Mark is legally married to Sarah? No, I said. That's bigamy. It's illegal. You can't just walk into a courthouse and marry two people. You can if you have a fake ID, David said. He used a slightly altered social security number. He changed 1 digit. And a fake birth certificate. He is legally married to both of you in the eyes of the state until this gets annulled. That elevates his crimes to multiple felonies. I left the accountant's office feeling like I was made of glass. I was broke. My credit was ruined. My house was likely going to be seized by the bank. I went home to pack. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. While I was putting clothes into a box, my doorbell rang. I opened it to see Mark's mother, Linda. My mother-in-law. The woman who I spent every Thanksgiving with. The woman who knit me a scarf last Christmas. She looked frantic. Her eyes were red. Oh, thank God, she said, trying to push past me. I've been calling you. We need to pull money for Mark's bail. The lawyer says if we can get him out, he can explain everything. I blocked the doorway. Explain, I asked. Explain what, Linda? That he has another wife? That he has a 9-year-old son? Linda froze. She didn't look shocked. She looked guilty. She looked down at her shoes. He loves that boy, honey. He didn't want to hurt you. He was just trapped. The world stopped spinning. You knew, I whispered. It's complicated, she stammered. Sarah is the mother of his child, but Mark said you were the one who understood his career. He said you were the strong one. We didn't want to ruin everything. You knew, I said louder. All those times he was traveling, all those times you told me he called you from Chicago, you were covering for him. We just wanted him to be happy, she cried. And frankly, Sarah didn't have your income. Mark needed your help to support the family. My blood ran cold. They weren't just covering for a cheater. They were accessories to the financial abuse. They liked me because I was the cash cow. They liked Sarah because she gave them a grandson. They helped him curate a life where he got to have both at my expense. Get off my porch, I said. Honey, please, we're family. I said, get out, I screamed, slamming the door so hard the glass pane rattled. I locked the deadbolt and slid down to the floor. I had lost my husband. I had lost my money. And now I realized I had never really had a family to begin with. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hello? Is this the other wife? A small, shaky voice. It was Sarah. Yes, I said. This is her. I just came from the police station, Sarah said. She sounded exhausted. They did a paternity test on Leo. He's Mark's. I figured, I said. But that's not why I'm calling, Sarah continued. The detective told me something else. They went through Mark's phone, the real phone, the one they found in his glove box. What is it? I asked, bracing for impact. It wasn't just us, Sarah said, her voice breaking. There's a woman in Florida and a college student in Ohio. He wasn't just living 2 lives. He was living, God, I don't even know. He was meeting women everywhere. I closed my eyes. Of course. The 2 families weren't a result of indecision. They were just the 2 biggest anchors in a sea of narcissism. Sarah, I said, do you have a lawyer? No, she sobbed. I can't afford one. He took everything. I don't have much left either, I said, but I know a guy who specializes in fraud. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street in an hour. We aren't fighting each other. We're fighting him. There was a silence on the line. Then a small breath of relief. Okay, she said. I'll be there. It's been 18 months since I looked through a window in Oakville and saw my husband living a double life. Since then, I've lost my house, my savings, and my trust in humanity. But I gained something I didn't expect. Freedom. And, strangely enough, an ally. Here is how the court case ended, where Mark is today, and the final twist that proves a narcissist never truly changes. The trial was shorter than I expected. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark's lawyer tried to plead insanity, claiming the stress of maintaining 2 households caused a dissociative fugue state. The judge didn't buy it. You don't dissociate while meticulously forging mortgage documents and creating fake Social Security cards. Mark eventually took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of bigamy, and multiple counts of forgery. The sentencing hearing was the last time I saw him in person. He walked into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller. The charm was gone. He looked at me, then at Sarah, who was sitting on the other side of the aisle. We didn't look back. The judge sentenced him to 8 to 10 years in state prison. When the gavel banged, I didn't feel happy. I just felt tired. The financial fallout was brutal. The court seized everything to pay back the banks. My house was sold at auction. Sarah's house was seized too. I had to declare bankruptcy. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown. I drive a 10-year-old Honda now. I'm working 2 jobs to rebuild my savings. It's a humble life, but for the first time in 10 years, everything in it is mine. No lies, no debt that isn't mine. Sarah and we have a strange relationship. We aren't best friends. It's too painful. Every time I look at her, I remember the betrayal. But we talk. We coordinate. We formed a united front against Mark's parents. When Linda tried to reach out to see her grandson, Sarah shut it down. You were complicit in the abuse of 2 women, she told them. You don't get to play grandma. They haven't seen Leo since. I thought it was over, but last week I got a text from Sarah. Check your email. I sent you a screenshot. I opened it. It was a screenshot from a Facebook group called Prison Pen Pals. There was a profile photo. It was grainy, taken inside the facility. It was Mark. He looked older, grayer, but he had that same smug smile. His bio read, wrongfully accused businessman looking for connection. I was a successful regional sales manager who was brought down by a misunderstanding and a vindictive legal system. Seeking a kind-hearted woman to write to. I have a lot of love to give. He was doing it again. Even from behind bars, he was casting his line, looking for the next victim, the next woman to manipulate. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I forwarded the screenshot to the prison warden's email address with the subject line, Inmate social media violation, soliciting fraud. 2 days later, the profile was gone. I closed my laptop. I poured myself a glass of wine. Cheap wine, but it tasted better than those Chicago chocolates ever did. I'm 36 years old. I'm starting over from zero, but I know exactly where my husband is tonight. He's in a 6x8 cell and he's all alone. And me? I'm finally, truly free. That is the full story of how my husband's work trips destroyed 2 lives. If there is a lesson here, it's this. Trust your gut. If the Facebook algorithm shows you something weird, click on it. It might just save your life.